Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today to the first Lunch and Learn series. I see we still have some people joining us, so I'm going to be admitting them. And while we wait for them to join, just so you guys know, I will be recording these sessions and they'll be available later on one of our YouTube channels for training purposes. So just so you know, they'll be recorded. Okay.
You don't mind that, do you? Oh, I do, but no, I don't mind. Oh, okay.
Mind as we get started, if you don't mind making sure that you can mute yourself.
Actually, initially, I'll find that. No, it's fine. What did you say, Mark?
Oh, I just can't get my headphones connected. Oh, never mind. I'm talking.
Okay. We'll let a few more people come in. Jane, I made you a co-host. Do you see my chat?
Okay, yep.
Are you able to do that?
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, well, it is 12:33, so we're gonna get started today. Thank you so much for joining us today for our first Lunch and Learn series. Really excited to start this year. The first topic is all about the education, interpretation, outreach, and marketing. And so today we're just gonna talk about these different methods that we use as an agency to meet our mission. We do really amazing efforts in all of these different categories and methods, so we're excited to define them today, to talk a little bit about their similarities and their differences, talk about the process and the methodology behind them, and then maybe some key messages for anybody in our agency, no matter what division you're working for, no matter what kind of role you play for our agency, key messages for you to kind of take home, and maybe that will help you in your own work for our agency with these subjects. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And just logistic wise, if you do have questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and myself or Jane will be watching, and we will be glad to answer them as we go along. We will have questions or time for questions at the end as well. Also, like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm recording these sessions as well, so they'll be available for training if anyone isn't able to make them, or if you'd like to show them to new staff members or something later, they'll be available. And also at the end of this session, I will be sending out just a super quick 3-question evaluation, because I really love to get your input. I really would value wanting to know what you'd like to learn about, if you find this valuable, if you have any other ideas for this series. So just be on the lookout for that in your email. Okay, so the Lunch and Learn series, since it's the first one of the year, I just wanted to quickly look at the schedule and what is planned for this program. This series came about because I really was excited to dive in more to the science and education topics that we look at and that we work with every day in the Fish and Wildlife Education Division. They're really exciting topics to me, and maybe because I'm a science nerd and I love education, but I knew that others would probably find them helpful as well, because I know as an agency, we do so much working with the public, we're a science-based agency, and we're doing a lot of education, no matter if it's field trips or even biologists out working with landowners. We're doing a lot of really great things. So I was excited to launch this series. It was really developed with the intention of, improving our internal communications, getting different divisions to kind of learn from each other, and really instilling that culture of continued learning within our agency. So I was really excited to start that. So the first one today is education, interpretation, outreach, and marketing, like I said. And then coming up in February, we'll be talking about the science behind how people learn, which I'm really excited about. In March, we'll be talking about motivating behavior change. So the psychology-based practices of what is behavior change in humans and how people go about doing that. And then in April, the role of the educator in engaging your audience in conserving natural resources. And then May is science literacy. What is it and why is it important? And then in June, communicating controversial topics and teaching tough subjects. So we will be having a lot of really fun subjects coming up down the line with this series. I will be planning the last 6 months of the year as well, and I'll probably be thinking about those topics and announcing them maybe later in the spring. But I would, like I said, I'd value your input. If you have anything to share, feel free to share that in the evaluations that go out. Okay? And before we get started, a little bit about myself, in case I haven't met a lot of you, I'm a little bit new to the agency. I've been around a bit in partnership positions, but I am currently the Wildlife Education Program Manager. I work for the Fish and Wildlife Education Division. I started in August. I was the Outdoor Education Specialist at Schramm Education Center before that. And I have worked with Game and Parks for several years, either as a temporary or in partnership positions. My education background, I have my bachelor's in fisheries and wildlife from UNL here, and I have my master's of arts in teaching biological sciences. And then I've worked for Nebraska Co-op Fish and Wildlife Unit. I've worked for a lot of different nonprofit organizations throughout the state. I'm from Nebraska, and I feel like I've worked all throughout Nebraska for Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, Pheasants Forever. I worked at different zoos, and finally here at Game and Parks. And my interests, you might see a theme here: science and nature education, science communication, science and nature, and just being outside. So I maybe am accused of being a little one-track mind, but I'm a big nerd. I love science, I love nature, but what I think I love more than that is just sharing that with others and being excited about that and getting other people excited about that. And I have a young son, a family of 3 dogs, and we love to be outside as much as we can. So I'm really excited to start this series and get going today. Okay, so today's topic is education, interpretation, outreach, and marketing. We wanted the first session of the series to just be pretty basic and just to really start off by defining as an agency what some of these terms are. I know that I'm pretty familiar with some of these terms, and maybe some of you are as well, but it's really important, I feel like, to kind of have a common definition because I won't lie, even the word interpretation, when I've said it before to family or friends, that sometimes I do that at work, they think I'm translating a different language, like I'm an interpreter. So there are different definitions out there, so it's important to just kind of define those as an agency. So that's what we'll be doing today. I'm going to be talking about the what and the why of each one of these things. And then we'll be talking about the considerations in each approach and how they're actually fairly similar for all 4 of these methods and how they work to help meet our mission. And then we'll be applying our understanding, and then lastly, just talking about our resources within our agency and have time for questions. Okay? Okay, so the first one, education interpretation. So really, when I was thinking about this, I first wanted to define education at large because it's a little bit different than the type of education that maybe we do as an agency. When we think of education, like if you're talking to someone about education, maybe the first thing they think of is a classroom. So they're probably thinking about formal education. They're thinking about where we're sending our students, every day. And that's a little bit different even than environmental education, which is something that we do as an agency. So education in its general sense is a form of learning in which the knowledge, skills, and habits of a group of people are transferred from one generation to the next through teaching, training, and research. So this is just really at its basic core sharing of facts, sharing of knowledge. And that's the kind of the core definition of education. Environmental education is a step, it's a little bit step in a different direction because it involves a process that engages students specifically as much as they can outside. We're learning about science, we're learning about nature. A lot of times it's experiential, a lot of times they're not learning about a life cycle in a textbook, but they're watching it happen, or they're out actually experiencing it. There is a kind of a parent organization or a professional organization that kind of oversees environmental education in our country. It's the North American Association for Environmental Education. It's a really great resource for environmental education topics and resources and materials and networking. And this is their definition: a learning process that increases people's knowledge and awareness about the environment and its associated challenges, develops the necessary skills and expertise to address the challenges, and fosters attitudes, motivations, and commitments to make informed decisions and take responsible action. So you can see in this definition, it goes a step up even from just sharing facts, because with environmental education, we don't just want to share facts, we want to motivate students to make informed decisions, to be responsible, to be stewards of the environment. So why is environmental education important? Well, like I said earlier, it's science beyond textbooks and walls. It gets them outside, it gets them unplugged and plugged into nature. And there are countless studies done where students being outside, students learning outside in nature just has just amazing benefits, not only for their health, their physical health, their mental health, their learning retention, their cognition. I put simply just improves health, focus, cognition, and a myriad of benefits of being outdoors. And I could probably do a whole session on all these different benefits and all this amazing research that shows the benefits of students and kids getting outside, and not only just being outside, but learning outside. So it's really fantastic for the students, and it really cements those moments in their brain, and it really plugs in like what science is, what the process of science is. I really like this quote, and I think it really encompasses environmental education to me. Do not try to satisfy your vanity by teaching a great many things. Awaken people's curiosity. It's enough to open minds, do not overload them. Put there just a spark. If there is some good, inflammable stuff, it will catch fire. I think that kind of shows a little bit of the why of environmental education. Okay, so we talked about what education at large is, and then a step up from that, what environmental education is. So what about interpretation? Interpretation is, there are some similarities, there's differences. I'm not sure how many of you all have heard of the differences before, or even heard of what interpretation is, but it is another form of something that we do as an agency. It's another form of kind of engagement in education that we do. So the National Association for Interpretation is the professional organization for this field within the field of natural resources, and their definition is: interpretation is a communication process that forges emotional and intellectual connections between the interests of the audience and the meanings inherent in the resource. So just pause for a moment and see, and look at that definition. And I don't see anything that says like sharing knowledge or imparting facts. Something that really stands out to me about this definition, it really is about for creating the connection. And so something that interpretation does that even goes a step up, I feel, from environmental education, or does a really good job focusing on, is making sure that a family or students or whoever your visitor is or whoever you're engaging with not only understands maybe like the importance of this pollinator garden or why this butterfly is here, but is connected to it, understands the bigger picture of it, and even goes a step and beyond, and maybe they're creating memories and they will remember that, and that will help them retain what they learn, and they'll have their own meaning for that. And so they have that meaning to that resource, which makes them, which we hope will create better stewards in the future. And so interpretation is a really fascinating field of study, and it's a really great way for our agency to meet our mission. So why interpretation? I put these photos of these little critters, these little tiny insects on here, because I think it hits the point home of why interpretation is so important. Often in the summer, if you can't find me, I'm usually like, my face is like down looking in the grass and the weeds, and I'm always looking for bugs because I'm a big bug nerd, and they just make me so excited and happy, and I'm always looking for them. But you are not going to find insects if you don't stop, slow down, and look at something. If you just look at a tree or a bush or something and walk on past it, you'll never know all the cool little living organisms that actually are living there until you stop and take time to connect and look. And I feel, to me, like that's what interpretation is. So we, as people who are working in our parks, or educators or science communicators, or anyone who's doing interpretation for our agency, we are that bridge that sometimes will help our visitors, customers, students stop and look at something that they might not have seen before. So interpretation brings information, facts, resources within a space, and it brings it to life for people. Maybe we're doing a guided bird hike, or maybe we're doing a landowner workshop and we're showing how to create a pollinator garden or something like that. If well done, it can be illuminating and enriching to someone's visit to our spaces. It allows them to see things they wouldn't have seen, or understand things and make connections they wouldn't have made. So for example, if a family's walking by and you're interpreting, let's say a pollinator garden or something, and you start talking about life cycles, or you start talking about food webs and food chains, they wouldn't have necessarily understood that if they just walked by. But because you're bringing that science to life for them right there, it's enriching that experience for them. So you're sharing not only important information about our natural resources, but you're connecting people to their previous knowledge. And that's what's really important about interpretation, because everyone shows up to, wherever they're coming from with their own knowledge. It's not a blank slate. So they already have some thoughts in their head about whatever they're viewing or wherever they're at. And so we're trying to connect the natural resources to them in a meaningful way. And we're trying to get them to think about why they should care, because it's important for the future of Nebraska's natural resources. So environmental education and interpretation are very, very similar. And when I talk to a lot of brand new naturalists, or sometimes if I'm doing training with master naturalists, people in this field, I hear people kind of get hung up on, is this environmental education or is this interpretation? And I think the important thing to note is that they are very, very similar, and it's okay, because I've been in this field, I think, for about 10 years now. And I can tell you that I've worn the environmental educator hat and I've worn the interpretation hat, and I have done them both probably in the same day. They're really similar, and oftentimes they work hand in hand to achieve really similar goals. Some of the nuances of why maybe there's some differences, a lot of times it has to do with the audience. And so environmental education often is a captive audience. What that means is maybe they're extrinsically motivated. So for example, think about a 4th grade student coming to a park for a field trip. Those 4th graders, I'm sure they're super excited to be there. They're pumped, but they kind of have to be there, right? Like their teacher brought them there. That's what they're doing today. They're a captive audience for 45 minutes. And so that's an environmental education program. And environmental education often has curriculum. A lot of times it's based on some science standards. So it has that kind of a little bit more structure to it. And you're really focusing on facts. Of course, you're using inquiry and you're making it engaging and exciting, but you are trying to kind of pass along knowledge and facts. Versus interpretation, slightly different. Often it's a non-captive audience. So what that means is it's often people who are intrinsically motivated. They are there because they want to be. Think about if you're working at a nature center, if you're at a park and you're a naturalist, and you have a family walk up to you and you're standing next to an exhibit. They're walking up to you, they want to talk to you, and they want to ask you more about a turtle exhibit or something. They're wanting to learn more on their own. They're a non-captive audience. At any moment during your naturalist talk, they could walk away, and that's okay. And that's part of interpretation. So it's kind of those lifelong learners. And it's a little less structured. It doesn't often have a curriculum like that, but really it's kind of theme-based. So you could be walking through a pollinator garden and you don't have to go from A through Z on exactly how you need to teach this, but you just have to have themes in your head. You want to talk about life cycles, or you want to talk about food webs, but then you let whatever happens, whatever your students or your visitors see or observe, kind of guide you but stick to a theme. So there's a little bit nuance difference, but really there's a lot of similarities. Great teachers, educators, and interpreters, they all use really similar interpretive techniques in the classroom or outside of the classroom to engage with students or their audience. They make lessons and topics come alive by relating it to the audience. So it's a little bit about the definition, the what and the why of environmental education and interpretation. And now I am going to introduce Jane Gustafson. She is helping me today as well, and she's representing the communications division side of things when it comes to outreach and marketing. So she's going to speak on the definitions, the what and the why of those really important methods. Jane, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you very much, Amber. And for those who don't know me, I am in the communications division. I am one of the assistant division administrators there, and my working title is marketing and advertising manager. And so that's kind of the part of the agency that I really think about is marketing and promoting and doing the things to let people know all of the really great stuff that go on at the agency and all of the really great things they can do in the outdoors. And it's been very interesting working with Amber on this presentation because there are so many similarities thinking about education and communication and marketing and outreach. There's a lot of crossover between all of this. And so it was interesting as we were looking at this, and it was interesting talking about this as we were doing some of the definitions for it. So if you want to go to the next slide, Amber, we'll talk a little bit about outreach. And outreach was the hardest thing to define out of all of the things that we had here because outreach is defined by many different industries and businesses and disciplines a little bit differently. So we kind of looked at those in doing some research and took an amalgam of all of those definitions here. And really outreach is reaching out to a broad audience who may be familiar with you or may not be familiar with you as an organization or a brand or a business. And the intent of the outreach is to provide knowledge or service resources to let people know that you have things to offer, that you have a base of knowledge, you have resources, you have something to offer them. And your goal is to become a trusted source of that information. Also, it often involves two-way dialogue with a lot of them asking questions, you answering back, and kind of going back and forth. But it's very helpful in establishing relationships, which is the goal of outreach, and in bolstering your brand. What is your brand about? What types of resources, what types of value do they have to offer people? Our goal with outreach is always to provide information and letting people know that our constituents have things that they can find out by working with us, and they can engage in our programming and a number of different things that we do. Do you want to go back one slide really quick, Amber? I was going to talk really quick about here. You'll see a sports show is kind of the picture we chose to illustrate this. We do a number of different types of outreach in a number of different ways, and all of our divisions do outreach through programs, through services, through answering questions with customers, through showing up at different events. So we chose this one, but we wanted to kind of make sure everybody knew that they all are doing outreach in a number of different ways. Okay, next slide. So how does that differ from marketing? Well, I laughed because we looked at the definition of this with the American Marketing Association, which is a professional organization for marketers. And their definition that you'll see up here is an activity, a set of institutions, and a process for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a very academic-oriented definition. And so we decided that maybe we should define that by applying it to our agency, which is basically communicating. We consider marketing communicating with a targeted customer audience with the intent of inducing a behavior change on a short-term or permanent basis. Now, that behavior could be purchasing a permit, it could be attending an event, it could be thinking about conservation in a different way than maybe people have thought about it before. Nonprofits and government agencies, as it noted here, often use marketing to help promote their mission, to help provoke people thinking about different things, much in the way that education and interpretation does, in a way that is a service to our customers and our constituents, but is also a service to that resource. It's a way of thinking about different things, particularly in the world of conservation. If you want to go to the next slide, Amber. So the communications role in marketing and outreach here is obviously increasing this awareness and engagement of different things that we do, and doing it through a number of different channels, through marketing, through advertising, through unpaid public relations, through all of this myriad of different outreach methods that can result ultimately in having more constituents and customers for Game in Parks. Obviously more long-term support for the things and the resources and the wildlife and the habitats and the conservation mission that we have for our state parks, for our hunters, for our anglers, for the processes and the management that we go through to allow people to hunt and to fish, and for outdoor recreation in general. And so it's communications role, but I will let you in on a secret. All of you are communicators. You're all part of the communications mission. You're all part of the education mission. So if we go to the next slide, much like Amber noted, the fact that there are two branches of the same tree for education and interpretation, the same is true for marketing and outreach. Marketing is maybe a little bit more strategic. It's maybe focused on creating the things that involve a brand. It's focused on the goal of making a purchase, attending an event, supporting a cause, or maybe adopting a belief that is involved in what we do as an agency. And so it maybe has a little more metrics to it, but it's very closely intertwined with the outreach. The outreach efforts are, again, any involvement that we can have in reaching out to different communities to provide information, to let people know about the things that we have to offer, and to help provide information about the resources, the programming, the ways that they can learn about outdoor recreation, the ways that they can learn about wildlife and fish and state parks and different things like that, and about activities they can do there. Oftentimes the outreach is that very first experience somebody has with our agency. Maybe they're interested in bird watching, but they don't know where to go to find more information, or they'd like to go canoeing, or they've always wondered what a pheasant tastes like and they want to harvest a pheasant. There's a number of different things that we do, and people come to us or they find out about us through our outreach efforts and the things that we do. As a marketer, I tend to think of all of the different PR things and all of the different things that we can do to get people in to achieve the goals that we want through marketing, which in my focus is a lot of times making people aware of us as a brand, selling permits, getting people to events, getting people into our cabins, getting them to our programming. And so I look a lot at the similarities here, and there are a lot of similarities with marketing and outreach. They're both forms of communication that are providing information and positioning Nebraska Game and Parks as a trusted resource and a trusted place for knowledge. And much like you will see with education and with other things, there is a lot of crossover and a lot of interweaving together of outreach and marketing with education. But the ultimate goal is always to encourage engagement with our agency. And so with that, I think I will turn it back to Amber.
Okay, thanks, Jane. All right, so considerations in each approach. So we defined what these are, and as you can see, some of them are a little bit tough to define because they are so similar, but we kind of created some common definitions, at least within our agency, what we're using. And so now we're going to talk about the methodology and the process behind what we do. A lot of us educators or us in communications division do when we're thinking about employing these methods for our agency. So what I want to talk about first is planning considerations for educational interpretation programming. And so there is a lot that you do on the forefront before we even decide I'm going to put together a butterfly program for a 4th grade class or something like that. And so the first thing we really want to think about when we're creating any kind of educational or interpretation program is we really think about the themes, overall themes of what we're trying to convey. Remember, they're going to forget facts, but they're going to remember those themes and those broad concepts, those connections that are being made. And then we really want to think relevancy. And that's really important. That's considering that audience, that's considering what's important to them. How is it going to be relevant to our visitors or our students? Why would they want to know about the theme? So I often, when I'm planning things like this, I ask myself a lot of questions to help kind of pull this out of what this program is going to look like. Why would the visitor want to know about the theme? What is the connection to their life? If I'm going to take, let's say, a pollinator theme, for example, how am I going to show that not only are butterflies cool, but why is this visitor going to care about that? Am I going to talk about the importance of pollination to their food cycle or to their own food system. And so considering that relevancy in whatever you're doing. Objective. So what is the takeaway? What is the one thing? I always ask myself, if I'm thinking working with students, what do I want those kiddos to go home and just be so excited to tell their parents or their guardians about? Like, what's one thing I really want them to understand and learn, and that a concept to grasp. So what's the takeaway? What's the objective? How should, whether it's a student or a visitor or a landowner, whomever we're communicating or educating, how should they use this information that we're giving throughout this effort? Are we giving them an action item? Are we talking about pollinators, and are we talking about the threats to pollinators, but we're not also providing, something that they can do at home to help pollinators? So make sure we're thinking about that, considering that. And then think about short-term and long-term goals. It's really difficult sometimes as a science educator to try to measure those long-term goals, because really our goals are something that we are probably not going to be able to see for 10 or 20 years, and they're really hard to measure. It's kind of like planting those seeds of those trees that we'll never feel the shade from. And that's how it is as an educator, because what we really want is especially for the young students, we want to create experiences, and we want to inspire these moments, learning about nature and science outdoors, that are going to inspire them to be lifelong learners and lifelong stewards of our natural resources. So those are our long-term goals as science educators and interpreters, but they're pretty hard to measure. But you can consider them in your programs. Audience, of course, is essential to consider. And a lot of times when I'm talking to some people and they're thinking about making a program, and they might say, oh, this is for everyone. I've heard that as well. But you really have to think about your audience, because depending on your audience and the parameters that you define your audience, there's going to be lots of different needs that will help define and kind of put boundaries on your program. So you're going to want to consider age. You're going to want to consider even audience motivations, their abilities, what's their knowledge. Are you doing some kind of bird-related program? There's a difference between how to plan it for some people who are completely beginning to birding, or some people who are a little better at birding, their skills and their perspectives. So these are all considerations that you want to think about. And then finally, that's when you get to logistics. And so there's all these different things. There's 4 big, huge kind of thematic things that you think about before you even think about the logistics, which is where is this program going to take place? What space do I have? What's the time limit? What kind of tools or resources do I have? And what method am I using? Am I going on a guided hike? Am I doing some kind of program in in a picnic shelter or a classroom? Am I doing a landowner workshop or something? So that's the logistics part. And then last is finally the delivery, and just considering how you're going to do it, and always understanding and remembering to prepare and be very flexible. I feel like as an environmental educator and an interpreter, you learn definitely the hard way. You have to be very, very flexible. And then how will you measure success? That's something really important to consider. How you're going to evaluate are your objectives being met? What does a successful program look like? And something to really consider before you even launch your program, instead of thinking about it afterwards. So that's kind of the process of planning for educational and interpretation programming. And then, as Jane and I were talking about the similarities between education and interpretation, and what we realized is, although there are many different methods and many different objectives to then outreach and marketing, that planning process looks really, really similar. There are some tweaks and some nuances that are different because of those different objectives, but that the parallels of the planning process are really interesting. And so again, with outreach and marketing, the first thing you kind of want to think about are your themes. Is this a mission-based messaging? Are we using the agency voice? A lot of the themes that according to the research that I know the marketing committee has done, is people really want to understand the emotional benefit of being outdoors. And so that kind of message plays well with our audience. And then what's the relevancy? So how are we connecting our services that we offer as an agency to the motivations of our audiences? Are we promoting what outdoors means to them? We're trying to promote the fun and creating memories, conservation, recreation, all those really important messages that are relevant to our audience. Of course, objective, what's the objective of the outreach effort or the event or the marketing campaign or whatever it is that we're planning. Short-term and long-term goals again. What are we wanting the customer to do? And then audience, of course, the age, the gender, and then specifically with outreach and marketing, a little bit different than education interpretation is what's their media behavior? What kind of platforms are they using? Does an underserved audience need to be targeted even a little bit more to expand our reach? And then considering maybe our heavy users are already current participants. Maybe they don't require additional targeting, but they just need reminding of opportunities. So there's nuances depending on the audience there. And then of course, logistics, what platform are we going to be using? How long are you going to run the campaign, or what's the effort look like? What methods are being employed? Are there partnerships involved? And then delivery. Be prepared to be attentive and consistent. How are you going to measure success? How will you evaluate the effectiveness? So you can really see the parallel there to the planning and the considerations.
So if you notice, those, like she said, the parallel, they look very, very similar. And a similar thought process goes through all of those things and goes through all of keeping in mind what your objective and your goal is, and starting through the process of what your audience is, what you want them to know, what they want to know, and how you make your message relevant to them. One of the things and one of the important themes, as I mentioned, there's a lot of crossover between different activities that we do. There's also a lot of crossover between the themes, the main key messages that we have for marketing and outreach. Now, a lot of times I would say, okay, a key message in what I'm working on right now is trying to get somebody to buy spring turkey permits, for example, or trying to get them out to a living history event at a park. And those are definitely strategic goals and strategic targeted messages and tactics that we're using to achieve other goals. But we also have some universal, what we call key messages that are over all of the things that we do in marketing and all of our outreach efforts. And those are things that are ongoing and are a little bit more timeless and help us build this brand that is the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, and position ourselves in people's minds to think of us as a resource for them for finding outdoor recreation, for learning different things, to build skills, to find places to go, to learn about the environment, and to learn about how their actions can impact conservation. We call these key messages our kind of our brand messages, and they overlay everything that we do. And we've noted them here so that we can remind everybody about what those messages are as you're going about the activities and the different tasks that you do in your job every day. We always want to remind people that game and parks and outdoor recreation in general, we have a number of opportunities and ways that people can go about enjoying, having fun, enjoying the outdoors, creating family memories. And at the same time, as an agency, we are working to have a positive impact on our landscapes and to maintain healthy populations for our game animals, for our fish, for our non-game animals. We're working on their habitats, and we're managing them in a way that is uses sound science and uses innovative techniques to make sure that we're maintaining the resource as part of our mission, both for use now and for future generations. We're innovative. We're doing that in the best interests of Nebraskans. We're doing that in the best interests of our landscapes, of our resources. And the fact that we have all of these outdoor pursuits in the state has a tremendous economic impact on the state of Nebraska. So there is economic benefit to what we do in addition to just intrinsic benefit. And we want them to remember that Game and Parks is a place where we can inform, educate, and help them engage with the natural world in a number of different ways. So even though you may not think that you're doing interpretation work, or you're doing education work, or you're doing communications work, really everybody is doing some part of that in the jobs that they do every day. Whether it be talking with your neighbor, whether it be talking with a school group, talking with your colleagues, maybe talking with a legislator. These are themes that work into a lot of what we do, and they work to support the education, the interpretation, and the communication that we do. And our goal with a lot of our outreach is to provide information and to help our constituents build skills and share their knowledge and to engage with us. And in doing that, and in doing marketing to try to convince them to do something in the short term or the long term, we're really trying to bolster all of these other efforts that we've done through education, interpretation, and communication. And there are a number of different ways that we can do that, and we kind of call those best practices. And so Amber put together some best practices to share and talk about these. And these things are very overarching and involve education, interpretation, communications, marketing, and all of the different efforts that we do.
Yes, thank you very much. So this, I could probably do a whole presentation on just this slide and the next slide, so I'll try to be brief. If you have more questions about this and want me to dive in more, I'd love to chat with you anytime. You can reach out. But these are some of the best practices in any time we're interacting and engaging with students, visitors, the public, specifically education, interpretation, and outreach, when we have those kind of objectives, those goals, those thematic things that we're trying to get across. And so I'm going to zip through some of these and then we'll keep moving on, and in the interest of time. So understanding your role is just really important to understand that we aren't there to, you're there to create those links between the knowledge and emotion. We're there to create those connections, to just ignite that curiosity between the visitors or the students or whomever you're chatting with and that natural resource. Probing questions it's actually a skill in itself to be able to ask the right amount of questions or the right type of questions, to guide really great discussions and to kind of have open-ended discussions that facilitate even better learning. And something I always try to remember is, and it sounds kind of silly, but nature is really the teacher. And so when I'm doing this kind of work, I just remember nature is the teacher here. And I'm just the guide. I'm here to kind of guide people to the understanding and to guide people to see some of those amazing cycles and some of that amazing science behind nature and the natural resources. Here's the exciting thing. You actually don't have to be an expert. A lot of times, like when I've been training, new naturalists, a lot of times when they just are out of college and they get their first naturalist job, they feel like it's a little intimidating and they feel like they do have to be an expert, but that's a really exciting thing is they don't. You're there to guide them, remember. So be prepared for hard questions, but be even more prepared to say, I'm not sure. That's an amazing question. Let's figure that out together. It's really important never to make anything up. It's way better to just model what the science process is. If you don't know something, that's okay. It's important to model, especially for students, that we don't know everything. That's part of life, that's part of science. And so in the right questions are even better than finding the answers, because they usually lead to even more questions and answers. So be a model. If you want a group of students, for example, to catch insects, make sure you're the one out there. I know I don't have any problem with this because that's exciting to me. Make sure you're the one out there being excited and leading the charge and showing that passion and that enthusiasm for the activity. And the next one, be enthusiastic, animated. People are going to be more excited to learn from you if you're genuinely excited about that subject. If I had to teach someone about machinery or cars, it would probably not go over very well. I probably wouldn't get very good feedback on the evaluation. Like I could do my best, but then if I'm talking about bugs or birds or anything outside, it'll be a lot better, and I can ignite that passion and that curiosity in others. And then more importantly, have fun. It should be an enjoyable experience. And if it's not, people pick that up. So laugh at your mistakes. Being in the world of environmental education, interpretation, outdoors, outreach, you have some really interesting things happen. You're outside, you have to be flexible. So it's important to have that humility and just continue to model what you want from your participants. Okay, so the last section really quick, and I'll probably just do one of these slides, Jane, is many divisions, one mission. So we all work for many different divisions in our agency. And we all play many different really important roles, but we're all here to kind of work towards that same mission, that mission of stewardship for the state's fish, wildlife, park, and outdoor recreation resources in the best long-term interests of the people and those resources. So although we are all in different roles and different divisions, we all play a really important part in that. And that's important to remember. And so today we just hope to kind of illuminate some of those methodologies that we use. Of course, these are not all of the things that we do, but these are some of the things that we do to kind of work towards that mission. So this last slide, I just kind of wanted to do a little bit of poll, a little bit of feedback. We talked about the definitions of education, interpretation, marketing, outreach. We talked about how they're kind of their own thing, but they're really similar. And so now I'm going to present to you just a few different examples, scenarios of something that our agencies maybe have done or would do. And I want you to just take your best guess of what approach do you think would be best for this, just to kind of see if we have an understanding. So I just put a poll up. The first scenario is certain fishing regulations have been changed and a new fishing permit is introduced. We need to let the public know of the changes and encourage them to purchase the new permit if it's a better fit for them. I also left it as multiple choice. If you think just one approach is best, go for it. If you think it's two, you can vote for two as well. Like I said, I hope after this you can see how each of them are their own methods, but they all work together pretty well.
Well, it looks like we have some folks that were listening, because it looks like they're answering the way we thought they would, or we hope they would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have about 50% voting so far, Jane.
And that was a good point, Amber, that you made, just to remind everybody that, we have resources within the agency that can help with programs that you're doing for education, interpretation, marketing, outreach, whatever. But don't think that those are the only resources in the agency. We have a tremendous amount of knowledge in our staff here for folks that are not subject experts in various different areas or have done different things. And so, I encourage everybody to look around and look at your coworkers and use them as a resource and a sounding board in a way to, access their expertise to figure out how you can put some of those best practices into play, or how you can do better at some of these education, outreach, and marketing type things, because we have really great staff here.
All right, I'm going to end the poll. Exactly, Jane, I absolutely agree with that. So looks like most everybody, can you all see the results? There we go. A lot of people, 71% chose marketing, which, Jane, would you feel like that's probably what method would be?
I think is primarily marketing, but I'm glad to see that a lot of people also thought there's an outreach component to it, because I think there definitely is an outreach component and some education to it. So see the interconnectedness of all of what we do here. Okay,
the second scenario, fisheries biologists are set up near the aquarium exhibit booth at the state fair. They're answering questions from the public. And passing out current fishing guides and other resource materials. So let me launch this poll 1 second and see what you guys think. What method might be, what method would this be or might be best employed here? What would you call this method? And I'm just gonna let it roll for 1 minute.
As we're rolling here, I'll remind folks too, if you have other questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. And I know that we have a couple things that have popped up here. Cassandra Dean from Parks wanted to know if the flow charts that were showed in this presentation could be sent out to the Parks Division in an email. And I think that that is certainly possible. We're happy to share those.
Yeah.
And when I say we, I should allude to the fact that Amber put those together and did an excellent job at it. So
thank you.
There's the we in here.
Sure, yes, absolutely. Thanks, Cassandra. If that would be helpful, I'd absolutely love to send that. Okay, I'm going to end the polling, and it looks like, can everyone see that? So I would agree with that. And Jane, I think that's what we were thinking for this scenario. This is probably an outreach effort, correct?
Very good example of outreach.
But there's education involved as well. There's probably interpretation involved as well. And there's marketing because there's materials being passed out. So you can see with these examples, the nuance between how all these methods, they have that definition, but they're being used interchangeably. And the last example here is going to be, sorry, let me get this poll up. Okay, so the aquatic wildlife education specialist developed aquatic ecology curriculum that aligns with Nebraska state science standards to be used by teachers participating in the Trout in the Classroom program across the state. We actually are just getting the trout eggs today for the program. It's a very exciting day in the education division. This is a real example, by the way. Looks like a lot of people are choosing education. All right, I'm gonna just end the poll there. So most everybody chose education, and I would agree with that. This has a particular curriculum. It's going towards even like a classroom education learning. So I would say education, but of course it's engaging with our constituents. That has an outreach component. It could have an interpretation component. There's materials, it's marketing. So I can see those as well, but I would say this is probably really heavy in that education category. So very good. Okay. Just gonna zip through those. All right, so this is our last slide. And like what Jane alluded to earlier, we just really wanted to let everyone know that there's so many amazing resources right within our own agency. So if anyone there, no matter what role you're in, no matter what division you're in, if you have an idea or a challenge that might be solved with one of these methods that you feel, just reach out to the expertise in our agency. We're fortunate to have that diverse expertise and skilled professionals within our organization to help meet your needs. Together through multifaceted approaches, we can continue to provide stewardship of the state's fish, wildlife park, and outdoor recreation resources in the best long-term interests of the people and those resources. I listed these 3 divisions below as kind of a resource division specifically to education, interpretation, outreach, and marketing. So Fisheries and Wildlife Education Division is a division that we're a resource division for education and for interpretation as well. Communications Division obviously are the prime focus for outreach and marketing. And Parks Division has a lot of really great folks that do an amazing job at interpretation and are really skilled at that. Now, that does not mean that only people from these divisions are really great at these different methods. We have a lot of fantastic professionals within our entire agency with some expertise in not only these subjects, but like Jane said, a lot of different content as well. So that's pretty exciting. So make sure we're reaching out if you guys have any questions. That is all we have today. I think we went a little bit over, but I guess time was flying when we were having fun. I know I was having fun, but I hope everyone enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. If you do have any questions, I'd be happy to stay on a little bit. I'll watch the chat. Remember, I'm going to be sending out an evaluation at the end because I want to get your input and your feedback on if this was valuable to you, if you have any other thoughts on this series, and if you need anything else from me, my contact information is there, and so is Jane's. And Jane, thank you so much for helping with the first Lunch and Learn series today. I really appreciate it.
It's very interesting. Again, I learned a lot too as we were putting this together about all of the different overlap that goes on there. And I'm really excited for the rest of the series because I think there's a lot of interesting things to learn here. And particularly with the Fish and Wildlife Division, Education Division being really new, I think we're all excited to see the things that you have planned and thinking about how we can leverage those things to do our jobs better and to, again, do that outreach marketing, do that education better for our constituents and people that just don't know they want to be our customers yet. So good job.
I like that. I like that thought, Jane. It's really good. Awesome. I will wait. If anyone has questions, I'll probably stick around for a little bit. Otherwise, thank you so much for everyone. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And we'll see you.
Sean had a question. He just is curious how you ensure the information you're providing is accurately tailored to your audience.
Oh, good question. The information you're providing is accurately tailored to your audience. So obviously you're always going to start with science-based information, right? So you're going to make sure that you have scientific resources. If I'm answering this personally, often I'm going to go to the resources that we have at Nebraska Game Parks. So if I'm thinking about like mammal ecology or Salt Creek tiger beetle or something like that, I'm going to go to like, what is our data? What have we done? What is our research? And so I'm going to start with scientific based information first. And then when you say tailored to your audience, I guess maybe I'm going to interpret that as maybe age appropriate, what works for them, what they're going to understand. That's something that it does take a bit of a skill as an educator for sure. And it takes a lot of years of experience and understanding. And it takes a lot of understanding of for students, child development, pedagogy, and those types of skills. But often you want to think like, for example, when you're writing something, I think they say like write for the kind of the 4th grade level if you kind of aim for that. I guess it depends on what specific program you're thinking about, Sean. But definitely start with scientific-based resources and information, and just be thinking about what that audience age is and maybe what their motivations are and what their skill level is to begin with. And make sure you're kind of connecting that information to them in a way that's meaningful to them. Thank you for that question. Anybody else? Okay, I'm glad it helps. Thanks, John.
And if you think of questions afterwards, please don't be afraid to reach out to Amber or myself or anybody in communications in the Fish and Wildlife Education Division, because we're always happy to try to help answer or help you do whatever it is that you do more efficiently and effectively.
Absolutely. And just as a last reminder, the next in the series is how people learn. So I'm going to dive into the science behind how we actually retain information, how we learn, which will help, I think, anyone in any role that we play in the agency. And that's going to be February 10th, I believe, but I'll send out a reminder for that. Okay. I'm not seeing any more questions. Are you, Jane?
Nope, I think that was good.
All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and end there. Thank you so much again, everybody, for joining us for lunch, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you for attending.
All right.